1 minute. That's all it took for Britain to cross a line it can never uncross. The clock struck noon, the gavel echoed, and the most powerful man in the country, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, was suddenly no longer free. In front of stunned witnesses, the courtroom erupted into disbelief. Officers moved fast, rehearsed, silent, the choreography of something planned down to the second. Starmer, once the face of stability, the man who promised to restore faith in British politics, stood frozen for a heartbeat before two security officials approached him. Cameras flashed. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, as if history itself blinked, he was gone. The arrest lasted under 40 seconds, but the silence that followed lasted forever. Inside that courtroom, you could feel the shift, the weight of something breaking. Journalists scrambled to capture the scene. The echo of leather shoes on marble floors cut through the stunned whispers. For those who had followed his rise, from lawyer to labor leader to prime minister, the sight felt unreal. A man who had once embodied order was now surrounded by chaos. No one expected it to happen there then, and like that. Outside, within minutes, the news exploded. Prime Minister arrested. The words flashed across every screen, every feed, every device. Cars stopped. People stepped out into the streets, staring down at their phones as though trying to confirm reality. At the courthouse gates, a storm was forming. Shouts, confusion, disbelief. Some cheered. Others cried. A few simply stood still, shaking their heads as if their country had just changed shape in front of them. Police pushed barriers forward. Drones hovered overhead. Reporters elbowed each other for position. The footage would soon become one of the most replayed clips in modern political history. The moment a sitting prime minister was led out of court in handcuffs. Starmer's face in that video will be dissected for years. Calm, pale, but with a flicker in his eyes that betrayed something between fury and fear. What had happened? What could justify the sight of Britain's leader being escorted away from a court he once presided over as a man of law? For now, there were no answers. Law enforcement issued a single line. The arrest has been carried out under lawful authority. Further information will follow. But further information never comes fast enough for a country in shock. Social media exploded before the official statement could even be drafted. Hashtags, #Starmer arrest, Britain in crisis, no one above the law, trended within minutes. Commentators filled the silence with theories. Corruption, breach of conduct, national security. The truth, for now, didn't matter. The image did. The image of power falling. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Before politics, Starmer was a prosecutor. The man who put others behind bars, the champion of justice. Tonight, justice had returned the gaze. For his supporters, it was unthinkable. For his critics, inevitable. For Britain, historic. As reporters pieced together fragments, one detail became clear. This had not been a random event. The police had been positioned before the session began. Orders had been waiting. Something inside the system had already decided what would happen long before the cameras rolled. Minutes later, Parliament was in uproar. Ministers whispered urgently into phones. Aides ran down corridors clutching tablets. Inside the chamber, news spread like fire. Some MPs gasped aloud. Others, sensing political opportunity, smiled. Opposition leaders called it the end of an era. Loyalists shouted political persecution. Every network switched to rolling coverage. The split screen of modern democracy. Chaos inside, confusion outside, commentary everywhere. And as the news rippled across the Atlantic, international anchors said what no Briton wanted to admit out loud. The United Kingdom, once a symbol of stability, now looked like a country unraveling in real time. What began as a legal hearing had become a national crisis. To understand how it came to this, you have to rewind, past the cameras, past the court, to the weeks of quiet pressure building beneath the surface. For months, whispers had been growing about alleged breaches of conduct, backroom deals, misuse of procedural authority. Nothing proven, nothing confirmed, but enough to plant a seed of doubt in a public already losing faith. Starmer, the man who promised clean government, transparency, and competence, had been weathering scandal after scandal, from energy contracts awarded to foreign investors to internal party accusations of double standards. Alone, each might have faded. Together, they built a storm. He walked into that courtroom today not as a leader in control, but as a man cornered by the weight of his own system. Witnesses say he appeared calm at first, measured, articulate. But under the surface, aides later revealed, panic had already set in. Meetings had run late into the night. Lawyers had argued over sealed files. Something was coming. They just didn't know when. And then the order came. The prime minister, the man trusted to uphold the law, was suddenly the one standing accused by it. Outside, the shockwaves hit instantly. Protesters and supporters clashed on the courthouse steps. Some shouted justice, others screamed coup. Police formed human walls between them as camera flashes painted the night in blue and white. Across London, pubs fell silent as screens switched to live footage. On trains, commuters took off their headphones. The question passed from mouth to mouth like a rumor from history. How could this happen here? In classrooms, students argued. In factories, workers stopped mid-shift. In Buckingham Palace, sources said senior aides watched the coverage with grave concern. Even foreign governments couldn't ignore it. The White House, the Elysee, the Bundestag all released cautious statements within hours. Diplomats whispered of instability in London. Because make no mistake, when the Prime Minister of Britain is led away in handcuffs, the entire world watches. Some called it democracy in action, others called it humiliation. Both were right. By nightfall, Parliament was in lockdown. Downing Street sealed. Advisors huddled behind closed doors drafting crisis scripts. Who would lead if Starmer couldn't return? Would Labour survive? Could the government? Power, once absolute, now felt fragile, like a chandelier swaying on a cracked ceiling. Inside the Labour ranks, panic split the room. Loyalists insisted the charges were fabricated. Rebels whispered of an emergency leadership vote. Anonymous ministers leaked to the press that no one's in charge. It was, as one senior aide described, the sound of the machine eating itself. Meanwhile, outside in the cold, Britain was already picking sides. For some, Starmer's arrest symbolized long-delayed justice, proof that even the most protected are not untouchable. For others, it was proof that politics had turned cannibal, that the establishment had begun devouring its own. The country wasn't just divided, it was disoriented. By evening, London had transformed. Protesters marched toward Westminster, chanting for truth. Others gathered silently, holding candles, uncertain whether they were mourning corruption or the collapse of faith itself. News commentators spoke of constitutional uncertainty. But to ordinary people, it was simpler than that. Britain had lost its balance. Even Starmer's allies admitted privately that he had underestimated how thin the ice beneath him had become. Every promise he'd made, transparency, honesty, reform, now felt like evidence turned against him. It said history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And tonight, Britain heard that rhyme. The echo of every empire that thought it could police the world but forgot to police itself. Because the question now isn't just what happens to Keir Starmer, it's what happens to the country that just arrested its own prime minister on live television. Will the system hold? Or has the performance of accountability replaced accountability itself? As midnight approached, the crowds outside the courthouse began to thin, but the tension didn't fade. Inside police headquarters, lights stayed on. Behind every window, decisions were being made that would define the next chapter of British politics. Tomorrow, the headlines will argue over legality, over politics, over blame. But history will remember the image, the handcuffs, the silence, the disbelief. The moment Britain realized that no one, not even the man in charge, was safe from the chaos he helped create.